Hi all, let's continue our look at Nakamura at the recent London Chess Classic Rapid Open. In round 8 he was paired against another super grandmaster, Anish Giri, 2776. So playing with the white pieces, Nakamura kicked off with d4. After d5, guess what? Something quite unusual, not c4, not knight f3. The third choice according to live is bishop g5, but actually bishop f4, the fourth choice. That's 1600 games in live book with this. Bishop f4. So is it going to be a London system type game? Knight f6, e3, c5. Now the London system is usually with c3, but making things a bit more exciting here, we see knight c3 being played. There's 92 games with knight c3. Popular is also knight f3 here. Knight c3, and now black took, e takes, a6. So depriving white of that b5 square. Knight f3, bishop g4, and the bishop can more easily do this without the bishop b5 checks. So that clever a6 in conjunction with bishop g4 solves any potential bad piece problem, getting the bishop out early. Now we see bishop e2, e6. So like Michael Adams in the round before, black is concerned about this light square bishop. It's a common issue in defensive systems where black is occupying the center on central light squares for that bishop to come outside of the pawn chain. And in fact, after h3, black voluntarily gives up the light square bishop. Knight c6. Pressure being exerted on d4 here. If white routinely castles, let's say white didn't do that, then okay, there isn't an immediate punishment on d4, but black stands quite well here after bishop d6. The engine gives it as a slight advantage for black actually, right? But knight e2 was played, and so any bishop d6 is the knight is ready to take on d4, so bishop d6. But in fact, another point of this move is that c3 is also possible, of course, and the bishop actually just comes back here, so he doesn't necessarily want this exchange on f4. Both sides take the moment to castle now. Knight e7, g3, as though there might be a fianchetto. Knight f5, bishop drops back, rook c8, and now c3. So it seems solid, but is this prone to the classic minority attack where b5 b4 in this case could isolate this pawn and create a backward c pawn? That's the idea. The minority of pawns attacks the majority of pawns here, trying to inflict structural damage. We see b5, queen d3, dissuading b4 here. If b4 in this particular position, then taking, and then queen takes a6 seems okay for white. So for the moment, queen c7, bishop g5, queen c4. Nakamura doesn't mind the exchange of queens here. He plays rook fd1, so we're in for a bitter contest now after the exchange of queens. But where is the queen going anyway? If it goes to d2, knight e4 might be possible. This doesn't look as though white should be interested in this particular position. There seems to be a lot of pressure on white's position, and the double pawns are not so easy to exploit. It looks as though black's got a very active game here, especially with things like b4 lurking. It looks like as though white's passive. So basically rook fd1, bishop e7, knight f4. A lot of manoeuvring is about to occur. Knight d7, okay, an exchange of dark square bishops, queen d2, a5, as though b4 is still on the cards for the classic minority attack. Bishop e2, queen c6, bishop d3, as though there might be something brewing on this diagonal, queen b6. Now a4, so fixing a5. Does black really want to play b4 here? If black plays b4 here, then maybe c takes, is in white's favour here. The engine gives white better here in this position. White has that past a pawn, and also there's a prospect on the other side of the board with knight h5. So this looks as though there's simultaneous pressure here on both sides of the board. So Giri actually took on a4. Yes, that seems to be more active, just to correct backward pawn immediately on b2, which is targeted. Bishop c2 here. So on queen takes b2 in this position, queen d3 is good. So say g6, rook b1 actually sneakily traps that queen. So that's a very sneaky idea, this to facilitate rook b1, queen d3. Say this, then that looks dangerous, giving up h7. That looks unpalatable. White's better there. So yeah, for the moment, queen c7, not going in for that. Rook da1. So a5 has been left as a target, and only rook takes b2. Of course, there's bishop takes h7 now. So g6, now coming back to protect the b pawn, which is now attacked. Basically, knight c6. So an interesting situation has emerged. Far from white having structural damage inflicted on him, it seems black is left with the odd pawn on a5, and white's structure looks for the moment quite solid. Although this is technically a backward pawn, it's balanced by this one. Rook 4 to a2, knight b6, as though the c4 square is going to be used. h4, trying to soften up black's pawn chain around the king, maybe. And a lot of manoeuvring now. Rook f8, offering the exchange of queens. Now, if black didn't have the exchange of queens here, then this could brew up something quite dangerous after h5. You could imagine maybe sneaky resources like this. So Giri actually took the queens here at move 31, and rook ec8. There's tactical pressure. Knight takes d4 threatened. Bishop gets out of the way. Knight c4. b2 now under fire. Knight d3 protects that. So a simplified position, but this backward pawn looks to be under fire, and the knights are holding a5. Bishop a4, trying to get rid of one of the knights. c5 is available for white as well, potentially. King g7, king g2. Rook c7, rook e1, knight d8, bishop d1. Yes, some interesting maneuvers now from both sides. Knight c5, rook e7, bishop a4, rook a7, bishop b3. Now bishop takes c4 would actually be quite nice for white to follow up with rook a4. There's be a weak pawn on c4. Black gets out of the way of that. Bishop c2, bishop d3, rook b8, rook e1. Yes, manoeuvring, quite a long phase of manoeuvring in this game. Rook c7, rook e1. The threat is actually rook takes e6 now in this position after rook e1 on move 48. That wasn't missed on Giri. That knight is actually tactically quite useful, even with the king over here. g4, knight b5, bishop a4, knight d6, rook goes over here, threatening now bishop takes c6, and rook takes a5, knight d8 getting out of the way of that, bishop c2, threatening things like b4 here. Taking on a5 is always balanced with the b pawn. Rook c7 now. So getting away from that b4 pin. So if b4, black could just take that. Bishop a4. Knight 6 to b7. Knight is challenged, so it goes to d7 here, hitting the rook. The rook moves, and it goes to e5. Yes, it's funny manoeuvring. Rook b6, rook e1. A lot of manoeuvring for a rapid game. So now at move 56. Knight d6. This is a real subtle battle here between the super grandmasters. Knight d7, rook b7, the knight goes back to c5, rook b6, bishop c2. There might be h5 on the cards at some point. Knight 6 to b7. Black is not letting white have a chance to undermine the light squares just yet. Now here, actually h5 wasn't played. Might be an interesting move to consider, but rook a3 was played instead. Knight d6, bishop d3, knight 8 to b7, rook b3. Yes, the rook is coming out like this. Very interesting creative rook maneuvers from Nakamura. Knight c4. This is now taken. First exchange for a while. Rook takes c4, rook a1, rook 4 to c6, rook b5. Is white making progress here? The rook invading black's position like this? Well, it looks as though the a5 pawn is more of an issue now than the b2 pawn. There's not even any pressure at the moment on b2. So what is Nakamura doing with these backward pawns? The management of backward pawns seems to be in white's favour. Kings come to the centre. They mirror each other there. King f6, but king d3 now. The king is wanted over here. g5. White takes this. And now king takes g5. This looks as though this might be a bit vulnerable with this king over there. f3. So can the king go to f4, for example? Well, black actually played f5 here on move 71. If king f4, I think this is too risky. Or just rook f1 if needed. Or king e2. It's not going to be doing too much. So actually Giri played f5. That was taken. King takes f5, and it looks as though there's a running h-pawn. Should black be excited about this running h-pawn? Rook h1 is a bit of a backward pawn target though, as well as this one now. There's two backward pawn targets. As well as being considered as a pass pawn, it's also basically a backward pawn. And the king is here, you'll notice. And so b3 has more effect to it with c4. It's difficult here for black. In fact, this is better for white from an engine perspective. What is going on here? If king f4, knight c5 check apparently is in white's favour. So say taking, well, then we take here, the b7 is on. So knight takes c5, d takes, and if taking here, rook takes. This is in white's favour, it seems. This sort of position could be quite a lot in white's favour after b4. There's two running past pawns here. There's also possibilities of checking. Yeah, so that's a very dangerous pawn mass after king f4. So the king f4. Now, if the king also steps back, let's have a look here. If king f6, this again is interesting. Knight c5 or rook h2. White's doing well here. So black proceeds with his h-pawn, h5, but now allowing this c4. It seems dangerous to allow the c4. That's why I was examining those two king moves. The king move is played now, offering d5. So black is trying to accelerate his h-pawn. He's hitting f3. C takes, e takes, rook takes. Now, so black has lost the pawn, technically a pawn down. If he plays king takes f3 here, rook g5 is strong, threatening rook f1 checkmate. If king f4, rook g8, threatening rook f1 checkmate. So this position, the king is in a bit of trouble. And there's a tactical resource here, knight b6, threatening d5. The king will be in trouble. If takes, there's rook g6. So this is starting to be very, very bad for black. So f3 wasn't taken, instead h4 was played. Now here it seems as though knight c3 might be a strong move, technically, threatening knight e2 followed by rook f1. That's very dangerous for black's king safety. Nakamura chose actually instead rook h3, and that's not a very good move, keeping white's advantage. Rook g6, but now knight c3 is played here, and this is +5 all of a sudden after this rook g6. Apparently this is a terrible collapse from an engine perspective. Rook e6 was a move which needed to be played apparently in this position, with the idea of rook e3 check. So say knight c3 here, rook e3 check, then taking on f3, and this would be okay. This is equal. Apparently this is equal. But with this move, rook g6, Nakamura played this knight c3, and he probably calculated this very well. This is at move 79 now, so both players must have been in great time pressure. I know it's a 10-second increment, but I can imagine both players down to their, playing on increment or something by this stage. Rook g3 was played, which seems very provocative for this knight fork. So what is Giri doing? Knight e2 check, king takes f3, knight takes g3. So the idea is revealed for black. He wants to attack both pieces and win a piece back, king g4. There's a slight snag to this. In fact, White's so much better here. He could actually just play rook h1 if he wanted to be better here. He's the exchange up, of course. This is very good as well, this position. The h pawn is not going anywhere in particular, it seems, with careful play. But even stronger, there's a knockout blow here for White in this position. Can you spot it if I give you 5 seconds, starting from now? So White to play. Okay, knight e4. Yes, letting the king take, because knight g5 check, forking king and rook, and here move 83, Anish Giri resigned. So the second super grandmaster in a row Nakamura defeated in the Rapid Open. What a grueling game. So the classic minority attack, the whole concept of minority attack here, very interesting how the actual implementations were affected, how White was dissuading black from playing that b4 earlier, and now how this well-timed move, it seems, a4, maybe this is an instructive move in this sort of position with b4 being faced, to sort of try and get an outside pass pawn potentially on a4. Very, very well-timed a4 here, positioning from a structural perspective. So White is allowing the backward b pawn in exchange for pressure on a5, and it seems that was always in a delicate balance there. What was of also concern that c4 square, but with the knight here it's holding that b2, and it's also black's c5 square is slightly vulnerable. So it was an interesting bishop and knight versus the two knights here, with eventually it seems the pressure on b2 was kind of neutralized. It wasn't evident, it seems, by all the maneuvering. Eventually White's rook slipped in with this rook a3 move, very aggressive idea to get the rook into black's position eventually. So maybe Giri was being outmaneuvered here. So not only frontal pressure on a5, but side pressure on a5 without any pressure on b2 had been achieved. Then Giri went for this outside past h pawn. The engine suggests h takes, not bothering going for the h pawn, keeping things perhaps more solid, so there'll be no frontal pressure on the h pawn later, which led to black's collapse. Actually, this position here maybe is a more solid choice to have considered, but Giri went for it with king takes and f5, trying to create this outside past h pawn with this method of knocking out this g pawn. So here, yeah, it looks as though also f3 is vulnerable, but White's rooks can switch like this, and this rook that had invaded the black position is now relevant for black's king safety and playing for c4. So that aggressive rook on b5 is quite instructive, the way that rook came in to this game. f3 is a positional sacrifice, getting that centre pawn. King safety would be terrible after king takes f3 here. Rook g5 is like a mating net's being woven. Let's just check that out again. Here king f4, rook g8, and it's like, you know, these terrible threats. So yeah, this is the h pawn, although seemingly lucrative. Black is a pawn down, and this knight came in, and slight, you know, inaccuracy. This rook move here, it looks very logical to use g3, but in fact maybe it was the e3 square which is the more critical to use here in this particular position to attack f3 from there. So from here, knight c3, the knight from a4 coming right back into the game with this check now, and actually becoming the winner of the game after knight takes g3, knight e4. This knight on a4 had done a miracle maneuver to e4 here. So black resigning after king takes, well, knight g5 check. Great stuff from Nakamura. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.